I feel more than ever we're starting to look into our past in order to better understand ourselves in the present and in the future. And, even though this show is set over 100 years ago, thematically, there's an enormous urgency to this story that makes it incredibly contemporary.
What is New Gold Mountain about?
New Gold Mountain is a murder mystery set in the gold rush era of the Australian frontier during the height of racial tensions between the Europeans and the Chinese miners at that time. And we follow a charming but morally ambiguous headman of the Chinese camp as he navigates the discovery of a dead white woman on the doorstep of the Chinese camp.
What's wrong?
It's a white woman.
What was it about New Gold Mountain that kind of attracted you to this project?
The story of the Chinese migration into Australia is something that I've personally have always had quite an invested interest in, and it is the story of Chinese Australia in many ways. I've been obsessed with the gold rush from the very first time I heard about it, and it's, finally a chance to put ourselves in the history books of Australian screen and from our perspective, where the Chinese are insiders to the story.
It's to remind people of home.
Yes. For a moment, I thought we were in Guangdong.
Can you talk about finding the locations for this series?
The locations really started with Sovereign Hill.
That's the kind of historically accurate town in Ballarat.
Exactly. It's basically a giant museum, but for us it functioned as this, $10 million backlot that we definitely did not build.
The series is also, it looks beautiful. You worked with DOP Matthew Temple, and I was wondering, why did you want to work with Matthew in particular, and what were some of those conversations that you had around that look? We chose Matt Temple because we knew we really needed someone who was, creative and agile, given the timeline that we were working on. And Matt was definitely that person. We had quite a long, pre because of COVID. And we were able to just have those conversations so early on that it became really naturally part of the DNA of the visual language of the show. So I don't have a memory on set of us having to discover what the show is. And I think that was what was so unusual and wonderful about the shoot for New Gold Mountain, because it just felt like everyone understood the DNA and what we were all trying to do.
I am proud to have the chance to show our achievements.
There are several instances where you used a split diopter lens, and I was wondering why you decided to utilize that.
I was watching Watchmen, the HBO series, and they used it a couple of times in it. It's just one of those camera tricks where I'd always known about it, but I was sort of reminded of it and just thought, I think that's going to work really well on this show. So I had mentioned it to Matt really early on. Hopefully, a lot of there were times where you can't even tell, because to me, that's the best kind of visual diopter. You just kind of like, whoa, I feel a little bit discombobulated. And I think that's the point. Like, something wacky is happening here. That's basically why I wanted to use it, because it's so visually rich and interesting but organic. It's not our usual depth of field in how we see the world.
What do you hope that audiences will take away from watching New Gold Mountain?
I hope that audiences will be moved enough to care a little bit more about our history. I hope that people will kind of go, how interesting. I didn't know that we imposed a tax on Chinese people during that time. And maybe they'll go and Wikipedia it or do a little bit of Googling and realize that there are certain aspects of our history that is repeating itself with different races or different cultures and all that we haven't spoken about at all, but housed in having just experienced a show that, made them laugh and stress them out and maybe you also cried a little bit at the end.